I was assigned to be the session chair this morning, but I would like to know first if Dr. Anta Alveja is in the room. Thank you. This is a very sui generis form of conducting the activity, but I feel better that you are present, just in case that we need to divide this task. Taking into account the heterogeneity of the audience in terms of expertise, I won't overwhelm you with numbers and figures and so on, but I will give you the details of our proposal, an approach considering what is an idea, just as the title mentions, in order to improve the survival in cancer patients. Because the nutrition is somehow related with the incidence, and it has possibilities to make some changes concerning the vital status of those patients. With breast cancer as an example, this is to illustrate you the situation of the most important cancers: breast, in this case, colon cancer, prostate cancer, in the world. This is where I belong. Although this little country, here at the bottom of the map, is a developing country, we are sharing some features with developed countries. North American, several countries of the European Union, and also in Australia and New Zealand. We have certain features that we share concerning nutritional patterns. The nutritional or dietary styles involve some common things. The most important, in my opinion, would be the meat consumption, red meat consumption. Uruguay is the country with the highest intake per capita in all the world, a little bit over our neighbors, the Argentinians, which are well known. And this is something that takes us close to the idea that I want to communicate. In the last 10 years, we have known that patients experience better survivals concerning the disease-free survivals and the global survivals when they experience some changes in relationship to their nutrition status, mainly with diet and body composition, also including the physical activity. In average terms, 30 or 35% of the responsibility of cancers are related to dietary patterns. So there's something that we can do before a cancer develops, but also after the diagnosis was established. Summarily, we share, as I said before, these main things: a high intake of soy, sunflower, or corn oil, that is lots of omega-6 fatty acids, a high intake of high glycemic load foods, that's concerning not only bread, but something related to these foods, a high intake of well-done red meat, That's the core, perhaps, of this. Low fiber intake and low intake of fish or seafoods. Together, these factors are summarized here. There is an inadequate omega-6, omega-3 ratio and a high cholesterol intakes. This is accompanied by or followed by this constellation of syndromes that all are defining what we know as metabolic syndrome, concerning disturbances in the profile of fats in blood, hypertension, the pre-diabetes or diabetes, disturbances in estrogen levels, etc. So this all is linked also to obesity. And we finally, for example, concerning to breast cancer, we have changes in the correct or desirable level of estrogens and activation of the nuclear factor kappa B, that is a clue factor for inflammation. And therefore, we have an increase of risk for these cancers. We could say that some intakes increase the risk of cancer when they are low. For example, the fish or fish oil, here carotenes, here citrus fruits. Other foods, other intakes represent an increase of risk when they are high, when the intakes are high. For example, red meat, eggs, as an example of cholesterol, common oils and margarines. So we are facing some sort of pattern, a combination of factors that here in this case were selected because of their importance. Only with the exposure or teaching purposes where we can group these foods, the protective here in the extremes and centrally the risk foods, and we have defined an inadequate pattern. We can and we must change this to an adequate. This is the proposal. This is the approach. And we need to find not any type of changes. We are hearing continuously that we need to eat, for example, less red meat, more vegetables and fruits. We know that plants are giving us the better substances. But this is so inaccurate, so lack of accuracy, so imprecise, that our idea was to bring to the concept limits. Base, limit, upper limits. And what is our target? The target is to reach a low-risk zone for each item. We have studied large databases, around 10,000 patients all over 20 years in our country, with the main cancers. And the proposal is to reach the lowest intake category for the risk factors or risk foods, I would say, and the highest intake category for the protective factors. Only to give you an example, considering breast cancer, I would mention this. Red meat intake should be from 0, no intake, up to 1 time per week. This is the range that is associated with a low risk. Concerning fruit, we emphasize the citrus fruits, and our base intake would be 8 units or servings per week. That means, for example, twice a week with 4 fruits, 4 units. It's simple. concerning oils and fats, the idea is more simple also. A complete substitution of the common oils by extra virgin olive oil. These are our goals. For example, we need to accomplish this ratio from triglycerides and HDL in the lipid profile because it's this safe. The estrogens ratio in urine could be more than 2, that's ideal. The serum vitamin D level, I would say it's mandatory to reach not 30, over 40. Some specialists say over 50 nanograms per milliliter. And also to reach this below this value to make feasible that we are not falling into the insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia area. Concerning colorectal cancer, there are some differences and some similitudes, but I would emphasize this. For example, 2 kilos, 700 grams for the package of plants divided into this value for vegetables and this value for fruit intake per week. That's nothing. That's about 400 grams daily. And also we are including a supplement of omega-3. We are needing this, more than 3 grams, to reach an impact on the area that we are needing to change. Not only metabolic one, but also concerning antioxidation and also the immunity status. The strategies that literature is mentioning, established within these last 10 years, that patients are compared both having a conventional strategy but one arm with a specific nutritional strategy, these attempts have found better results concerning disease-free and global survival. Our proposal is proposing the same the application of specific measures related to nutrition, but not only taking into account specific population features of these dietary patterns, because nutrition is not universal, but also combining with selected items from international literature. In other words, the recommendations for people in the Rio de la Plata, in the River Plate area, Uruguay, Argentina, and south of Brazil, would not be, one can suppose, would not be something practical for people in China, in Scandinavia, as an example. We need to know the populational features of nutrition and the relationship of this to the presence of these cancers in order to apply this. So we have additional problems related to this. The recommendations say that patients should ask their oncologist before beginning any diet or exercise program. But the medical education, not only in my country, something of universal application, lacks of nutrition in the curricula. So there are difficulties to give patients adequate answers to this question. Should I change my eating habits? Should I make additional exercise? Etc. So I am convinced, and I will insist with this idea, the cancer patient does not deserve to afford the costs that the underestimation of nutritional issues represent for the physician. Why? Because patient might lose an opportunity of improving her or his quality of life, and probably also the prognosis of the cancer. We need to deal with these two main features, oxidation and inflammation. Inflammation is very important in the survival of cancer patients. This graphic mentioned that when the low C-reactive protein is present in patients, we have higher survival than when this protein when this is high, the survival is tending to the null. We need to control inflammation. C-reactive protein is an indirect measure of this process. So these are our goals. Changing the oxidation status and the inflammation status, we can give also energy and a better health, globally speaking, for these cancer patients. And also we can influence on the evolution of the disease. Before trying to make an attempt of nutritional changes, we are needing to take into account different dietary patterns of the study population. Some things are not of universal application. I insist with this idea, the need to recognize population, perhaps national, perhaps regional patterns, but these are not of universal application, and this is very important to take into account. That's a reason, in my opinion, because of we are experiencing sometimes some reaction from people, from colleagues, about the relative lack of usefulness of nutrition. But the point is, we cannot make importation of some styles, because we need to adapt there to the characteristics, to the features of the population. These are the publications where the term Nutriequalization was mentioned. This is from 2012. This is the first book published on nutritional epidemiology of breast cancer. This was from last June, from 4 months ago. This is in Spanish, but it means nutrition in the cancer patient and the fundamentals for a therapeutic optimization. I am convinced that the kitchen is the place where patients can begin to improve the efficacy of oncological therapies. Not only women, everyone in this task. So we emphasized the main features, I insist, inflammation, oxidation, and also the immunomodulation. And I would say that just as I feel that there are difficulties to make feasible in my country to put into the practice of this strategy, I am enthusiastic about that the idea will be something fruitful for other people in other countries. So everyone in other parts of the world could take into account that we need to make a previous work, that is to know the nutritional pattern of the region, of the country, to put into practice this idea. Instead of giving inaccurate and imprecise recommendations, we could give the patient strict, or I would say more accurate recommendations, taking into account their own dietary patterns. Thank you very much for the attention.